everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Jedi Way here on the Outlaw Nation channel. I am the Outlaw John Rocha, sometimes known as Rocha Fed around these parts, joined as always by the co-host of Force Toast Pod and the co-host here on the Jedi Way, Laura Kelly. How are you, Laura?
I'm doing great. We're here. We've worked our way through internet issues. Unfortunately, Kevin is not here again this week. He's dealing with some more family and personal stuff this week, but we will hopefully get his download next week with episode 7. But yeah, happy to be back with you talking Star Wars.
Agreed. And it's a shame we missed Kevin. I would have talked him into doing this thing shirtless, just like Qimir. It would have been a lot of fun to see Kevin try to do this thing shirtless. But of course, we send out a lot of thoughts and good thoughts overall for Kevin and what he's dealing with. So if some of you want to spare a thought or two for Kevin, please feel free to do so. But we are here to spoiler review episode 6 of the Acolyte Teach/Corrupt. Laura, we're back to the 2-word titles because we split up Mae and Osha again. You've got Mae going off with Sol pretending to be Osha. You got the actual Osha on an unknown planet there with Qimir being seduced to the dark side. And then we'll have Vernestra by the end of the episode coming in there like a detective, trying to figure out what happened, and also maybe having some connection to Qimir, as some people are speculating, or having much more of a role to play with what happened on Brendok than we had initially maybe believed. So there was a lot in this episode, but did the episode work for you overall, Laura? Let's just start there. What are your thoughts here on episode 6?
Unfortunately, it didn't, because this episode felt a lot more like episodes 1 through 4, which also really have not been working for me, either individually or like as a whole. I guess episode 3 had some good for me. That was maybe my favorite one besides 5, which I thought knocked it out of the park. And we set up all of this great momentum and action in episode 5, and then we pulled it way back in 6. And so I'm kind of back in my headspace that I was in with 1 through 4, where there's good and there's bad. I think this show just isn't for me, which is really unfortunate. In this episode, there's some stuff I like for sure. I don't dislike the entire thing. I'm not a big fan of like the pacing in this show. I just wish that we could pick up the pace and then keep it going a little bit like we did. It doesn't have to all be action packed like episode 5 was. That would be exhausting. Right. But I just need a little bit more momentum, I think, than what I'm getting. So this didn't really overall work for me. Like I said, there is some stuff in it I like. I like a lot of this sort of like Last Jedi vibes that we're getting from this stuff with Qimir and Osha. I don't think all of it 100% works, particularly with their chemistry. But there's stuff there that I like. Really curious to see where you stand on this episode, because again, I think it was last episode we all were pretty much in agreement that 5 was like pretty solid. What are you thinking now with 6?
I mean, and one of the things I said was we'll see if they can keep this momentum going into episodes 6, 7, and 8 to kind of end the series, because people sometimes will forget how you start if you end really well. That's kind of an important thing when you're looking at projects, you're looking at films or TV shows. But unfortunately, we pulled the action back, which I was okay with. I mean, that's a breakneck speed. The last episode would have been difficult to keep that going for another episode. But unfortunately, when you pull back the lightsaber fights and the incredible visuals that were going on there and the shocking deaths and all these things that keep you like in a heightened state of emotional reactions, we're left with the story. And I think what has come to be very clear is that for some of us, the story isn't working. The stakes aren't 100% there. The character development isn't 100% there for Mae and Osha. There are too many questions that are not just questions that are like intriguing, more like questions like, come on, I need these answers. If you're trying to get me to care about these moments, I need to have these foundational answers about who they are and what these relationships are and what their motivations are. Because if you answer all these questions by the last episode, that means I'm going to have to go back and watch all the episodes to understand what was going on fully. Whereas I could have understand a bit more. I could have been invested a bit more already going into it. So then I'd be excited to go back and rewatch the season and kind of see it through that prism once we get all the answers there by the end of the season. So there's just not enough answers here, and they're asking us to keep holding on. Even in this episode, Sol, what are you supposed to tell the council, Sol? nothing. And so you don't hear it. And so it just gets to be a little bit frustrating. But as you said, I did like some of the moments here in this particular episode. I think there's some good things that I liked. And so there was enough here to keep me intrigued to watch the next episode. But I wish they had come back with the same quality that they had in 5 into 6. And I think they exposed themselves a little bit when you look at the story. So should we just dive into the particular sections here, Laura, and have a spoiler review discussion on these and everything that happened here in the episode?
Sure, fire away.
All right, let's do it. Let's jump into Osha and Qimir here on the supposedly unknown planet. Laura, I mean, it looked a lot like Octu, and as you said, there were some Last Jedi vibes. I mean, Osha is wearing the clothes that Rey would wear. Qimir is taking his shirt off, just like Kylo did in their connective tissue. There's a lot of sexiness in the most recent not that there wasn't like Han and Leia and stuff, but like certainly there's been this undercurrent of sexiness throughout the Disney Star Wars. And here it comes again with Osha waking up in this cave, and she's looking around. We see these cute little Star Wars creatures. She steps out of the cave with the knife there, ready to do something using Mae's knives. Then we see in the distance that Qimir is walking with his back turned to her. She follows him to this lake. He takes his clothes off, goes inside, and right when she grabs his lightsaber, he, with his back turned, speaks to her from the water. And then this is the beginning of, in essence, a Sith seduction to the dark side. He comes out fully naked. This is like House of the Dragon over the weekend. We got a lot of nudity from pretty good looking guys. By the way, where's this gym? Where's this gym, Laura, in the Sith world that you can look like this, for God's sakes, both him and Kylo? But anyway, he comes out, and then we have this discussion more and more between them about he starts to slowly chip away at her connection to Sol, chip away at her connection to the Jedi, trying to manipulate the narrative in her mind that they threw her out. She didn't leave of her own volition, that they were the ones who rejected her because he was rejected by the Jedi, and he surrenders that in the vulnerability. He reveals his scar there twice for her to look at. So clearly there's a bit trying to get some sympathy from her. And then he talks about kurtosis and the helmet being able to protect thoughts and focus you on the Force. It's just you and the Force inside the helmet. And by the end, we see her breathing heavy in the helmet, a la Darth Vader. So Laura, I mean, I talk about this with Shannon in the Geek Buddies review, and I had some people comment down below, oh, I'd like it if a woman or Michael was on as a gay man to explain this a little bit more. You tell me, Laura, as a woman, what did you take out of this? Did you buy this? Did you buy her getting converted in one day to be putting on the helmet, throwing away the feelings that Jecki and Yord were killed right in front of her, old friends or new friends as well? Like, what are your thoughts on all of this? And what did you feel about these sections of this episode?
I mean, that is probably one of my biggest issues with it is we're being a little bit too forgiving, a little too quickly when you just watched a bunch of your friends and fellow Jedi get mowed down by this person that you're now just stuck on this island with. So that part didn't necessarily work for me. The pacing of these scenes wasn't great for me. This is a lot of just walking and talking, walking around this island, and we're just kind of trudging along. And the pacing has been my main complaint with this series so far to date, and this section in particular is no different. The thing with this section is that this really should have been right up my alley. I love romance in Star Wars, and I am constantly starved for it. Yeah. To the point where anytime I get even like a breadcrumb of it, I'm set for weeks. Like, I could be happy for just forever. Like, I'm good. I only need a little bit every now and then. Right. I feel like they were shooting for me, like they were aiming for me in this, and it just doesn't work for me for a couple different reasons. One, I don't think we've had quite enough time with either of these characters to make me care about them individually, let alone care about them together. And two, I'm not buying the chemistry between the two of them at all. And part of this, I think, is I feel like they gave Manny Jacinto's character all of the good lines, and he is just doing the most with it. Right. Like, I'm really enjoying his character in this. I think he's just absolutely knocking it out of the park. And I think they gave him a lot to work with, and that makes for really compelling and intriguing character work. So I am enjoying what we're getting from him. I feel like he's just acting at a blank wall for a lot of the time when it comes to working opposite Amanda Stenberg. Like, we're just not getting a ton from her. I don't think that that's entirely her fault. I think a lot of this is her being sort of directed to be this deer in headlights, seemingly at every turn. But it's just slowing things down for me in a big way, and it's just kind of killing the chemistry. Like, I feel like there could be something there maybe, and maybe that's what they're building up to it, and they think they're doing a slow burn, but I'm like, you're just, if you're going to do a slow burn, the chemistry needs to be there, and I'm just not sensing it. So I'm happy that there are a lot of people that seem to be really into this sort of enemies to lover dynamic that they are trying for, perhaps, in this show. I think that this is more seduction and manipulation than it is romance, but maybe it'll blossom into something else. I don't know. I'm open to that. But I just wish that we knew Osha a little better. I wish we were just getting a little bit more like expression and emotion from her. The fact that she seems like so catatonic after watching all of her friends get murdered, like that might have something to do with it. Maybe she's in shock, but we're trying to like build the chemistry between these two characters to make this all believable. It's not coming off as believable to me. So like I said, this should have been right up my alley. A lot of this should have been right up my alley as a High Republic fan and as a Star Wars fan that tends to be into romance. In general, it's not working for me yet. Maybe it'll get there, but it's not there for me yet. I know romance isn't necessarily your primary like genre in preference when it comes to Star Wars overall. Was any of this work? Did this actually work better for you maybe than it did for me?
I gotta be honest, I like a good romance when it pops up naturally in Star Wars, when it makes sense. Even like the stuff in Rogue One, the kind of just slight illusions that if they had lived longer, maybe there was a romance here between Jin and Andor, and Cassian. So I thought that I liked that ending. I was very moved by the ending because I bought into Jin and I bought into Cassian, and they were the ones battling each other like legitimately. And I think that's the difference. And look, I respect that, and I've heard other people say this. Oh, it's not Amanda's fault. It's not. You got to step up to the plate when you get an opportunity, whether it's an underwritten role or the lines maybe aren't there. You've got to be able to bring that extra amount of talent. And I got that with Felicity Jones. I'm not necessarily feeling that with Amanda for the most part. I think there are moments where you really kind of see that she's doing the inner work and there's things that are affecting her as they're going along. But yeah, you get into these moments like when she whipped out her lightsaber to threaten him and whipped out his lightsaber and turned it on and threatened him in the way that she did. It didn't come off as strong as it should have. It seemed kind of awkward and out of nowhere. Yes. And why would she allow him to affect her? Like, because I think people are forgetting. Too many people are buying into this thing that she's this kind of lost soul that doesn't know what's going on. She was happy living her life as a mechanic. She had friends on the crew there. She was working outside on the ships. She was not sitting around for the last 16 years that we saw. I mean, I maybe you guys are installing that in your minds, but I didn't see anything for 16 years where she was like, I must find the answers of what happened. There wasn't enough of that. We didn't get enough time with her before everything was thrust upon her in the first episode. So there isn't like this feeling like, who was she before all of this popped off? And now these people showing up are reawakening this stuff within her. So there is this sense of like emotional anger and frustration and wanting knowledge. And like, there's this sense of a journey. And I feel like other people are dragging Osha through this journey, but she is not necessarily taking the journey. And that's where I think the issues are starting to pop up for me, because I watched the episode 3 times and I was trying to put my finger on what it is that isn't working for me, mostly with Qimir and Osha. And it feels like because Osha's just being yanked from one place to another, right? Sol, let me trick you into being bait so that we can see what's going on Kofar. Oh, I wanted out. I wanted to go home, but all right, fine. I'll play the bait situation. In the first episode, we're going to bring you in because we think you're the ones killing the Jedi. It's not me. Oh, my sister's still alive. Whoa, I got to figure what that's all about. Okay, she's alive. We have a chance to talk. I try to take her in, but then I'm subdued and now she's off being me. But there, you know what I'm saying? There's just not that drive of like, what is your role? What do you want out of all of this? And I don't really sense that there is a desire to find some kind of understanding. And so Chimir's seduction to me, I think I agree with you, falls a little bit on deaf ears, and it's not as powerful as it needs to be because the person isn't going back and forth as strongly. Like, this should be a push and pull. She should try to swim away. She should try to do things to escape. He should have to stop her. She should fall into some trap or some issue where he's got to save her. So she starts to realize, I'm stuck on this island with him. I might as well make the best of it and have these conversations. And then by that time, which should take a few days or a couple of weeks, we now understand like who she is and what she's all about. And we have a more of a deeper understanding. And maybe she breaks through into his vulnerability or his walls. And so this relationship now becomes more electric and interesting and compelling. At this point, it just doesn't have that thing that you wanted to have in Star Wars. And especially when it comes to the romance kind of things, you wanted to have that magic or that spark or that kind of what forbidden love type of aspect to it all, which I would love to see, but I'm just not seeing it here. But Manny is doing an excellent job. And I thought the way he spoke about the cortosis, the way he spoke about him being a former Jedi and revealing that he was kicked out. So what's the story behind that? There's a lot of mystery going on with Manny Jacinto's performance that I think is missing a lot actually from Amanda Stenberg's performance. So that's where I fall with all of this stuff. Power of Two, that was all cool. We've seen it all before. What makes this unique? And I didn't really sense a uniqueness to this. It almost felt like they were doing it by rote, Laura. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I felt at times.
Well, you mentioned, this scene where she takes the lightsaber and sort of pins him against the rock. And I mean, first of all, like, that should have been way hotter than what it was. Like, that had the opportunity to actually like be this kind of sexy moment, and it just kind of isn't. And I honestly do think part of that is on purpose, because as I'm watching it, I've watched that scene a few times. Like, you can just see that her heart's not in it. And the character's heart isn't in it. And that she doesn't seem like she really wants to hurt him. And so I think one of the things that I'm missing, and this is whether Reylo worked for you or not, whether you think it worked in the sequel trilogy or not.
Yeah.
Rey had a lot of passion.
Yes.
And she had a lot of anger and a lot of conviction. And when you pair that up against that sort of pent up dark side aggression that Kylo Ren was rocking, like, boom, fireworks, chemistry. And Osha is just coming off as this sort of like almost catatonic, expressionless, like empty thing that it's just not making for a compelling lead character in this show. And it makes it really hard to sell the scene. A scene that I think should have been easy to sell. So I don't know. I mean, I know you weren't like a big Reylo, but it's kind of hard to not compare the two when we're on a planet that looks like Octo and she's cosplaying as Rey. It's hard to kind of get past that. We also have like what look like mini Tala sirens, which by the way are very cute. The little creatures on this island are adorable. I do like their little porg sounds. I do kind of wish they were porgs. Because porgs are adorable, but because they're not, I'm guessing that this may not actually be Octo. I know a lot of the Legends fans are saying that this is planet whatever from Legends. Sure. That's fine. I think it would be interesting if it's Octo. I don't think it is. But that we can call it Octo since they don't name the planet. It's like, what's the point in not naming the planet? Just tell us what it is. You've been telling us what the rest of them are. I don't know.
And this is an issue with the show, I think. Too much of the dangling of the carrot that's unnecessary, right? I understand dangling the carrot when it organically makes sense in how you're telling the show so that the audience is like, ooh, right, what is this? I want to know. Whereas, oh, great, another thing they're not telling us and withholding just to keep us hanging on. There's a difference in how to do mystery well and how to do mystery okay and how to do mystery terribly. And I think they're doing mystery okay, but it could be so much better because you're right. What's the point of not telling us what the planet is? And then you come out in interviews, right? Like they came out in interviews, Manny Jacinto, yes, I am a Sith Lord. Oh, great. Okay. What else? What else, Leslie? Well, there's going to be more than one Sith. Wink, wink. Well, I mean, which is it? Are you going to keep the mystery or are you going to tell us what's going on? And I don't understand not telling us what's going on in the actual show, but telling us what's going on in interviews. That just doesn't connect for me when I look at how they're handling all of this overall. And it becomes a little frustrating because I think there's a great show in here, that isn't quite finding its way to the surface, or only bubbling up to the surface occasionally, as we saw in episode 5 in certain moments of those other 5 episodes we've had, but it isn't consistently staying there for you, for us to enjoy, like the first couple of seasons of Mandalorian or Andor did. And you know, I would argue some of the episodes of Ahsoka, and some people would argue some of the episodes of Kenobi for sure. Yeah, I love the little creatures. Great call out on. I mean, they're freezing and hugging their noses together to not be seen. That was super cute, and I love that. I actually agree with you on that one as well. But what do you think about the idea that about the helmet? What's your feelings about the helmet and all of this? Where is it? I think I have a picture of it. Is that it? Yeah, there. She's looking at the helmet. Do you think that she put the helmet on too? I mean, like within a day, and she'd even said, like, I won't. I'm not as weak as Mae. I'm not going to be as influenced by you as Mae was. And then within the day, within hours, she's putting the helmet on already. And then we hear the Darth Vader breathing voice. So, what did you think of that, Laura? Was that just meant as a wink to the audience? Are we making a commentary on Anakin when he became Vader? Like, what is the point of ending this episode like that, with her wearing the helmet and breathing heavy?
Well, I would love to know the answer to that question, because I feel like what's going to happen next in episode 7 is going to be another flashback. So even by the end of next week, we're still not going to know what the actual answer is. My interpretation of this was that her intrigue with the helmet was driven maybe more by the idea that it provides that sensory deprivation, that might be more appealing to her than like any other component of it. I mean, the fact that it's this like dark side user that's offering it up to her on a silver platter. I mean, it just it does seem fast, doesn't it? Like, doesn't it seem fast that we've been on this planet together for like less than a day, and already she's just like, yeah, I'll put your helmet on. Like, it seems pretty quick. So I feel like I can't have it both ways. I can't be like, you need to pick up the pace and speed things up because I'm bored, but I also can't be like, you need to slow things down. They've only been together for a day and she's already putting on, like, I can't have it both ways, and I don't know which one the right answer is. So it's just adding to my continued frustration with this show. I think that I feel like I am just anticipating that episode 8, which again is our finale, is just going to be her. It's going to like open up with her ripping the helmet off and just being like, "Oh, I didn't like that," and then then we'll just move on. Like, this will have been like this sort of little nothing burger we got at the end of this episode. But I don't know. Clearly, that idea just broke your heart. Where do you think we're going with this?
I don't know. Like you said, we got 2 episodes left. I thought we were going to see another. Like Leslie had said, there might be another Sith, or there is 2 Sith on the show. I thought we would see his master by now. And what really, in this episode rather, because we have 2 episodes left, and I agree with you, the next episode is being directed by the same guy who directed the 3rd one, Destiny. So we are absolutely getting a flashback episode. Now, I don't know if it'll be flashback going back and forth in time, but certainly it is going to have flashback scenes in it, if not be entirely flashback, which would be such a disservice at this stage of the show, because we want to see more of what's going on in current day. And then we get the finale, you know, and Leslie said something in an interview where she was like, well, we debated back and forth whether we should show that Manny Jacinto was the master or was the Sith. And I hope I'm saying her words correctly here, or paraphrasing. And she said, but we were going to save it for season 2. That is in the interviews, Laura. So that to me knocked me for a loop, that they were already planning a season 2, which tells me that season 1 is just meant to introduce these mysteries, and we may not even get a lot of the answers by the end of the 8th episode of season 1. We may go, what the? And then we'll just have to wait till season 2, which, judging from the ratings and judging from the response, may not ever come to be. And so I just find this, I find myself to be worried about what is the end result going to be in all of this. Because I mean, if they really crap the bed by the end of the season rather, this is going to be a bad situation for Star Wars, you know. And then Skeleton Crew has an even bigger boulder to be trying to try to push uphill when it comes out, when it comes to Star Wars TV. So I will see. I mean, I thought she put on the helmet way too quickly. Yeah, that to me seems so odd. Because again, I don't know what is going on with Osha. And please don't tell me the 16 years. That was 16 years ago. We don't see her tortured by it. We see her tortured by the loss of Mae because Mae keeps appearing to her, and we hear Mae at times talking to her. That's there, but we don't know fully how much this has been really torturing her. Apparently, it's what caused her to leave the Jedi, and it's not enough to just say, well, she left the Jedi because of it. We've got to really feel that, so that when she puts the helmet on, we are like, oh, shit, what's going to happen now? Is she going to see the visions of this? Is she going to confront herself? Where are we going in her mind? You know, but I just felt it to be a little bit flat because she puts it on and it's just her breathing heavy and looking out the portals. And so it didn't have quite the effect I was hoping it would have. But, anything more to say on this, Laura, before we move on to the other storylines in the episode?
You mentioned that, the possibility of a season 2, and I know Leslie Headland in these interviews has indicated that the plan is to not answer every question. There are going to be unanswered questions. There are going to be mysteries left open to solve in future seasons. And yes, they are planning on having a second season that has not been officially greenlit.
Yeah.
And I wish it was still 2009. I wish the show had the same opportunity that a show like Parks and Rec did, where it was okay to have a wildly underwhelming first season and then somehow still go on to have a super successful 7-season run. Yeah. We do not live in that world anymore. Attention spans even since then have gotten even shorter than they were then. And I'm glad that fans are having fun with this show. I'm glad that there is an audience for it, having fun with the Acolyte. But in this era of content where we are blessed with a constant stream of prestige TV, we are 6 episodes in, and I still just think that a lot of the acting is a little bit stiff and a lot of the dialogue leaves something to be desired. So I'm at a loss. I wish this show had more time to sort of find itself, because I don't think it has yet when we're 2/3 of the way through the season somehow. But I'm in the same boat as you. I worry a little bit about its future prospects.
Yeah, we'll see. And you're right. And this is a hell of a month to prove your point, Laura, with House of the Dragon, with The Boys, with The Bear. I just finished season 3 yesterday of the Bear. There's so much great prestige TV, and that's just 3 of the shows. There are a lot of other shows that are out there that are dropping on different streaming services that, bring a lot to the table. So you gotta have to compete on that level. That being said, as Laura said, if you're enjoying the show, then more power to you, because it's working for you. All art is subjective and you're loving it. We just have our issues with it, and that's what we're talking about here. So we will see. One last thing. Do you think the power of 2 is going anywhere? Him mentioning it, was that just a wink, or do you think that's going somewhere to the story here?
I'm glad that you asked, because I have a sort of theory on that, in that we have this concept of there can only be 2 when it comes to the Sith, the master and apprentice. And I kind of think that this power of 2 idea is almost his way around that. We know that there's going to be another Sith. My presumption is that he's got a master. He's got somebody he reports to or reported to at some point. And he says that line in episode 5 of the Jedi might call me a Sith. I don't know if he necessarily thinks of himself like that. I mean, maybe he does. Maybe there's an interview. Feel like people have made like references to interviews where they have referred to Manny Jacinto's character as a Sith. Again, I kind of think that that's just, I think that's just people like not wanting to spell out like this is a dark side user. It's just an abbreviation for that. Yeah, right. I don't necessarily interpret that that's what he is. And I don't think that's what he thinks it is. I think that this relationship, this power of 2, is just kind of a different route around that rule of 2 that the Sith have. I think that this is his way of not being a Sith, because we're sort of circumventing that rule. But I don't know. I haven't like fully figured out where we're going with that, but I feel like it has something to do. I feel like it's some kind of separation between the Sith and whatever brand of dark side he's rocking here.
Yeah, he might be someone in the middle, like rejected by the Jedi and rejected by the Sith. So in a way, a lot of people have been speculating he's the first Knight of Ren. We've heard Kylo's theme play. So that could be another way that he is, like, he's been rejected by both sides. And remember what he said to Sol was like, I just want to be free to practice my usage of the Force that I like, right? And so that's what he's saying. So maybe he's been rejected by both sides because he doesn't feel comfortable in either side. And in a way, he's an outsider. And maybe that's the way in with Osha is that like they both feel like outsiders because they walked away from both situations or been kicked out of both situations, which may have been why he was trying to like make her say that she was kicked out so that they could find a kinship, having both been kicked out of the Jedi. But she's very clear that she left of her own volition, which we only have her word to go on for that in the end, because we know that Endara wanted her out from the first episode. So, all right, well, let's take a break here, Laura, and let's jump. After we do, we'll jump into the Mae and Sol storyline and the Vernestra stuff. I really want to hear what you think about the Vernestra situation. We'll be right back right after this. All right, let's get into it. Laura, we have ourselves a ship that Sol is on with Mae, who is pretending to be Osha. And they do this dance. You know, a lot of the criticism from a lot of people was, oh, how would he not know that she's Mae? How would he not? Good to see the tattoo. And I will say they seem to have addressed that or had anticipated would be an issue because the braids seem a little bit longer there when you see it this time around. So kind of covering up the tattoo, but still. We think to ourselves, we're watching a majority of the sequence that he might not know that it's her. Does he know it's her? So we do this dance. He lets Mae drive the ship. He communicates with the council that his entire crew is dead. His entire team is dead, which you can tell really devastates him. The power seems to go out. So he asks Mae to take a look. Well, Osha, but Mae, take a look at this to figure it out. Mae insults the Jedi talking to him and even says to him, you know, you focus on something too much. You can't see. That's why you couldn't see that Qimir was a Sith person. And certainly that's a question that Sol asks her. And then he doesn't seem to interfere when Bazil loudly reconnects Pip into the ship's computer. And then they both comically attack Mae for some reason. And then eventually he tells her that he's going to come clean to the High Council, which intrigues her, and she wants to know the answers of what he's going to say, and she grills him on what he's going to reveal. But when he has a very long pause, she just runs to the console to communicate to the High Council, and he stuns her from behind. Yet again, Mae is stunned from behind with that gun in front of Bazil. And the ship takes off before Vernestra gets there, which we'll talk about in a second. And then Mae wakes up strapped to a table, and it looks like Sol has kind of gone heel in wrestling terms from face to heel. And there's a darkness. The Q is dark. He walks into the light. She's moving her head away from him. And he says, I've been wondering what I was going to say to you for 16 years. And now that you're here, you and I are going to have a talk. And then that sequence ends. So, Laura, your thoughts on what we got here with Sol and Mae? And did this work for you? Or did it not work for you? What are your thoughts on this?
Some parts of it worked. I think that the mystery that it's adding, the web that it's sort of spinning into this show, I think that part works. I found this a little bit more intriguing. This attempt at humor, this goofy, humorous bit, did not seem to work at all. It didn't really seem to fit the tone of the episode or really of the series in general. They keep trying to sort of insert these bits of humor, most of which hadn't worked for me. This one really didn't. So yeah, I could have done without that, but it's making me very suspicious of Sol. I mean, the way that the power cuts out, people are like, well, did Mae cause that? Did Bazil somehow cause that as a distraction? Like, I'm like, my first thought was like, Sol did that. Like, so I felt like that was his doing. So I'm starting to get a little bit suspicious of him, just given the timing. Like, it seemed like he at first, you know, wanted to report to the council, but then maybe had a change of heart. Maybe that's when he actually realizes that this is not Osha. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he did think for a short period of time that that was Osha, just because he was so distracted and devastated, and maybe that kind of just pulled his focus away that he didn't notice. But I have a feeling he notices pretty quickly that this is not in fact Osha, and I think he just kind of goes along with it. But I mean, who's to say? I guess we won't know unless Leslie Headland doesn't yet another interview where she reveals the answer, as seems to be the strategy with the show, which is fine. But yeah, for the most part, I kind of like that we're adding a little bit more mystery to the story in these sort of scenes. But in general, I mean, with this episode in general, I'm kind of left with a lot more questions than answers, which I get is kind of what they're going for. That's fine. But yeah, there's some execution bits that kind of didn't necessarily work for me. I am just really intrigued to figure out what is going on with Sol and to finally get this answer of what did he do or not do, or what was he responsible for? What did he witness? I mean, they've been dragging this on now for like literally six episodes. So I'm curious to find out more. But I mean, what were your thoughts on this sort of segment of the episode and all of this between Sol and Mae?
Yeah, I think we're back into the same situation we've had with Manny and Amandla, in that Lee Jung-jae is really bringing a lot of power to his performance. Like, when he is really grasping the people who've died under his watch with Jackie and Yord and everyone else that was there, you can tell that he is destroyed by it. And when he reports to Mog, who is going in and out of communication there, you can tell that this is something that is affecting him, right? And he hugs Mae / Osha so hard there. Thank God, thank you for helping. And again, we don't know if he knows it's her or not. But then when he's by himself and in front of the council and he's talking about what he's talking about, you can tell that he's really affected by all of this, and his mind is starting to race. And I hear you. I have thought that Sol might have done this to see if it's Mae or Osha, because Osha could have clearly fixed it. So what's happening here? But then it all gets kind of thrown off with Bazil, because I'm like, why is Bazil making all this noise? Then he reboots Pip and uses some modern technology, hitting it twice and resetting it. But Pip gets sucked into the computer. They spit some kind of liquid in her eyes. He kind of does some weird karate moves and comes at her and tries to bite her. It's so ridiculous. This is a person who has killed 2 Master Jedi, because the third one was killed by Qimir, the 2 Master Jedi, and had her knife out to kill Sol earlier in the sequence. So I don't get why we have to do, and people are going to be mad when I say this, why we have to have these Filoniisms in the middle of these darker situations. Why we need to take a moment for this, I just don't understand. And then later, why does she not go after Bazil? Why does she just let him wander around? Why doesn't she trap him and keep him somewhere so he doesn't interfere with her trying to go after Sol? So just questions I have with how this all went down. And then Mae, what side is Mae on? Like, she's so waffling every single episode. There is no spine in the ground. She is just waffling from one of the, which is okay for a character if you've given me enough background on this character to understand why she'd be this way. Because when we are introduced to her through possibly Osha's point of view in Destiny, she has got an anger streak and an evil streak, and she's trapping butterflies, and she's yelling at her sister for not sharing, and she's willingly becoming the witch and carrying the legacy of the witches. Carrying the legacy of the witches and being a flip-flopper and having a weak spine, that immediately erodes her. So I just don't understand this. But that being said, the final moment certainly intrigued me, certainly hooked me, because of the score, the way Sol was sitting calmly on the side and then comes out of the darkness to say this thing to Mae. And, I was wondering what I would say to you all, when I saw you again after all this time. And then he's like, well, we're going to do this, but you and I are going to have a little talk. So there's a menace here that I've never seen from Sol. And when Lee Jung-jae plays it, it makes me go, oh, okay, what's here now? So for all the clumsy awkwardness of it all, I think it worked in the end to get me to that moment and get me intrigued to see what Sol is talking about, which I hope we finally answer in the next episode, for God's sake. Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I'm like, you make a really good point that his role in this episode, I think, is great. And that bit, particularly at the end, I mean, the people who are making the show know what they're doing. They know how to leave us on a cliffhanger. They know how to leave us super intrigued and to suck us into the next episode. So there is some stuff that they're doing really well. And yeah, those dark music, that dark music we're hearing along with that in those final scenes with Osha or with Mae and Sol, it's fantastic. Yeah. So that was well done, I think.
Yeah, I feel like the music over the last 2 episodes has really ascended to be another character in the show, as it's been in other Star Wars shows. But I felt it was a little bit of a slow buildup over the first 4 episodes. Now the music cues are really noticeable and are really taking you into places that they want to take you that coincides with what's going on in the story. So I like that. All right, let's get over. Anything more to say on that? Shall we move on to Vernestra here?
No, let's get into Vern.
Okay. We go to Coruscant. Vernestra is stressing about an impending senatorial review here of the Jedi Order by the senators there. And one of the senators there is saying, well, it's just these senators that are, quote, grabbing for power. So kind of giving us some early prequel trilogy stuff that is going to come to fruition, of course, 100 years later. We have Maug coming in and telling her what his communication with Sol was and that Sol's entire team went out. But he does say, like, from what I gathered, because it was in and out the communication. So this inspires Vernestra to go and investigate. There's a weird bit of humor about her getting sick in hyperspace. But after doing a bit of research, it is a High Republic thing. I think you can speak to it better than I can, Laura, that is connected to Vernestra. She gets these visions in hyperspace, which unsettle her. They take off on a T6 shuttle, which we'll see in Clone Wars that the Jedi use, which was fun to see live action. They land on Kofar, and I describe this as her doing a Prince Humperdinck, like going through the battle as she listens to the Force echoes, which only a few Jedi we've known have been able to do this. Obviously, Rey recently as one of the most recent examples. I think Cal Kestis, I think, was able to do this, and there's others that were able to do this. But she is, but Maug starts to entertain the idea that Sol might have had something to do with this, and she kind of considers it. And when you look at the fact that he took off just as she arrived, you could certainly see the logic. But then we start to hear this uber moth from behind her, and she whips out that lightsaber whip, cuts it in half. And for me, I thought immediately, well, that scar on Chimir's back. And we hear her say something about tipping the scales, which referenced the conversation she had with Sol a couple episodes ago. So now we're left with the feeling, is she, as I speculated a couple episodes, could she possibly be a bad person in all of this? Or is there something more here? And is she connected to what happened on Brendok? So, Laura, what are your thoughts on what happened with the Lady Vern in this one?
First of all, leaves us asking if she's a good. No, there's no we in this. I am not questioning this at all. I feel like I know it in my bones.
Okay.
That there's just no way that Vernestra is a Sith Lord. First of all, I mean, it's literally preposterous. Like I cannot even fathom. I guess I get, if people haven't read the books, I get where it's coming from. Yeah. I get that they seem to kind of be setting that up as, but I just am praying to God this is a red herring, because it just is a ridiculous idea given what we know. I mean, I pointed it out on Twitter today when I was talking about this episode that the ship that they take is called the Canteros. This ship is named after her first Padawan that she had when she was 15, Imri Canteros. Now, they don't actually say that or address it in the episode. That showed up in the databank after the fact, but I really like that little detail. I think that's adorable. Do you think that this character who's, questioning, is this something that's going to tip the scales? This character that names her starship after her first is this a Sith Lord? Is this a thing? Is this behavior that a Sith Lord would have? I just don't think it is. So I don't see it. Now, I think the coincidence of us seeing the whip in live action and seeing those scars on Manny Jacinto's back, I'm not sure if we're allowed to look at coincidences like that and think that that's what they are. I think there's a good chance that correlates. My hope is that she did not do that, that maybe somebody got a hold of her lightsaber and did that with it without her knowledge or consent.
Oh, interesting.
Or if she did do it, that she was justified in some way, that he did something truly horrible. But even that is hard to wrap my mind around, her attacking what I guess was a Jedi at some point, or at least a Jedi in training, ? We're still not sure. This theory that he may have been a former Padawan of hers, maybe. She hasn't seen his face yet in this show, so I think that's totally plausible. I don't like the idea, but I wouldn't rule it out. But yeah, I mean, us getting to see the whip in action finally, went straight by. I mean, I'm glad that they showed us that clip in the footage, the promo footage that we got ahead of the show, because it got me really excited about this show. And having just read the young adult novel Defy the Storm, where we get some really great descriptions of her using the light whip, it just got me really pumped to actually see it in person. And then to see her just use it to swat a bug. One of my followers tweeted something to me that was so funny. Ryan Menner, of all things to introduce the light whip for, a blink and miss it, nonchalant swatting of a fly. I'd have hoped for better. That made me laugh quite a bit last night. That was pretty funny. And a very good point. I'm like, I literally forgot about it. I mean, after all of the, after what we saw in that episode, as I'm tweeting about it and talking about it and texting with friends about this episode last night, I completely forgot until one of my friends mentioned it. Oh yeah, what about the light whip? I was like, oh yeah, I what about it? I completely forgot. So I really hope that we actually get more of it, because that was kind of underwhelming. I'm not in the boat where I'm like, I wish they hadn't shown us in the footage. I do. I'm glad that they showed us it. I just am hoping that we'll get more, because that can't be it. That can't be it. But I don't know. I'm like, I know you haven't been into the High Republic books.
Right.
And I know that you have had this theory prior to this episode that she might be a dark side user. I'm not standing up here trying to convince you or argue my case, but I am curious. Yeah. After I have said all that, where do you think?
Well, I was surprised to see Sol go a little dark at the end of his situation with Mae. So
yeah.
Are they opening the door to that? Because he seemed to warm to that personality very quickly, which was a little unsettling. And then you see this situation, and maybe this is a red herring, because I think a majority of the people watching the show have not read the High Republic books, and so Vernestra is a new character to us. All right, what's her connection? What's her story? People come in with High Republic knowledge. You all know all this stuff about her, but the rest of us don't. So she remains a mystery to us as a character. And again, we haven't had any scenes. Well, how can I say this correctly? We haven't had a lot of scenes, shall I say, or enough scenes where it's Vernestra by herself and she's having these conversations with Mog, or she's talking to Ki-Adi-Mundi or other people on the council there about the situation with Sol, about what's going on, hearing the reports, having her own thoughts, maybe even speaking her own thoughts, as she does in the sequence here when she's talking to herself and we hear it. I think that if we had more of that, then maybe we understand who she is and the core of what she is. But right now she's a bit of a mystery. So the idea that the face that Rebecca Henderson made was one of concern, worry, and also hardness. And so maybe she's not a dark side user, and that's a fair point to make, Laura, but maybe she was part of what went down on Brendok, and she herself carries some guilt on it, because she's been very afraid of being found out, that this going to the High Council, this situation, getting past their insular world so that it affects them. The fact that we had a senator show up and say hey, they're going to do this, but they're just scrambling for power, using you guys to make a name for themselves. That can't be something that just goes away and is not going to bear some fruit. So clearly Vernestra has been trying, it feels like Vernestra trying to hold this thing together, and now these secrets are leaking out. So the question becomes, what is her role in all of this? And what is she going to do to cover it up? And so she may not be a Sith Lord, but she may do some dark actions here in an effort to try to save the Jedi or protect the Jedi, because she knows they're for the greater good. But in the end, is that going to blow up in her face? So these are the questions I have. And I agree with you. Not so much Sith Lord, but more a matter of are there things she did that could be seen as dark acts because of thought she was doing something for the greater good in the situation, so.
Well, for sure. And we see that with Yoda in the prequels, and we see it with Yoda in the High Republic too, where he makes these decisions to cover things up, thinking that he's doing the right thing. And ultimately it ends up being, I think, a bit of a downfall for a lot of people. Yeah. So, she probably comes by it honestly, given all of the examples that she has lived through with her life, or in her very long life.
Yeah.
Her referencing, or the show referencing Vernestra's hyperspace visions was kind of a cool moment. It would have been interesting to just see a little bit of it. I'm not saying that we needed to spend a lot of time on it, but you had this 38-minute show, all this time walking and talking with Qimir and Osha. I'm like, you could have given us a few minutes of what exactly does that look like? Because I would be curious as a High Republic fan who has sort of been in with her on this, where she does have these hyperspace visions of very era specific characters appearing to her and talking to her, whether they're ghosts or her own hallucinations or some I don't know.
Yeah.
But it is a really interesting thing to see. And instead of like telling us, it would have been great if we could have seen a little, like show don't tell a little bit. I would just would have liked to have seen it. I had this issue with Rebecca Henderson early. I didn't have all the issues that Shannon had when I did watch that episode you guys did where he went on that rant. That was entertaining. But I didn't feel quite as strongly about it as he did. But ever since then, I mean, I feel like so many of her line readings, it feels so robotic.
Yeah.
It just feels like she's trying to sound like a droid. And I don't understand why. I don't what are we doing with this? For what reason? I understand like she's been through a lot and maybe she's trying to like cut herself off from stuff, but it's weird and it comes off as way too droid like some of the things that she says. I don't know. Has that stood out to you, or is that just me? Because it's really bothering me.
I don't mean to pile on, because I don't want to pile on, because I mean I like Rebecca. I loved her in Single Drunk Female. I've enjoyed her when she's popped up as a recurring guest star in other shows. I think she's a good actress for the work that she's done. Russian Doll, what have you. But I think here this is she's a little bit out of her depth. And I think it comes through when you're watching her in some, and you can say, oh, out of her depth in a space opera with talking creatures. And yes, because there is an element of seriousness and stakes, especially with a character like Vernestra, with the limited amount that I do know, because I've done research on her to try to have some more knowledge and stuff with these reviews. But like the limited knowledge I know, this is a woman of immense accomplishment, of immense trials and tribulations since she was very young. So there has to be a real weight and just power when she speaks and when she talks about things and when she relays stuff out. Even in her talking with Mog, when she's trying to get him to, ask the question, what are the right questions? This kind of thing, like a mentor detective to a young detective. There has to be that, just a little bit more of that weight and resonance. And gravitas is a word I like to use. Like gravitas, you have to feel that. And I don't think Rebecca is giving us that. And so you bring up the issue of like, well, this is her wife, Leslie Headland's wife. Why would you cast your wife in the role like this if your wife couldn't bring the hammer the way she's supposed to? And, you think about, well, what if Carrie Ann Moss had been casted as Vernestra and Rebecca was Indara? I think that's the smarter move, especially because if you're going to give a Vernestra a lot to do here in these final 2 episodes, or maybe the last episode, the battle, Carrie Ann Moss in green speaking about these things, I think would have carried much more weight and resonance, so that we would be looking forward to finding out what happened. And you could actually be like, well, I see why she messed up, and I see how it haunts her and she carries it. I'm not sensing that with Rebecca necessarily. So it's an unfortunate situation in the way it is. So I agree with you. I'm not as far down the road as Shannon is, but certainly there is something missing here in the exchanges, and there's an importance missing from her in her performance. And I do wish it was better, so being honest, I hate talking shit about an actor I legitimately respect, but you got to be honest, and it's not quite there. So I hear you. Yeah. Anything else you want to add here with the Vernestra stuff? Where do you think we're going? Any speculation on her? What's your feelings?
I really am hoping that we just get more light whip than that. I need to see it more in action than that. So that's really my main hope at this point. Other than that, my expectations are and probably should remain pretty low.
Okay.
And that's what they are. Sadly.
All right. So that's your final words on this episode. Should we wrap it up there, Laura? Anything more you want to add, or no? Are you good?
I think we could probably wrap it up. I don't know if I need to continue to pile on, unless you've got any last things to add to it.
I mean, we've given it 55 minutes, so I think we're good to wrap it up. So there you go. That's our spoiler review for episode 6 here of The Acolyte. This one directed by Hanel M. Culpepper, written by Leslie Headland and Jocelyn Bio. Teach/Corrupt is the name of this one. It seems like we're going to be getting a flashback episode in the next episode, so we'll have maybe more meat to chew on after episode 7. So look for our review here on the Jedi Way, and hopefully Kevin will be back next week to hang out with us. It's killing him to miss our reviews. You guys should know it is killing Kevin to not be around. Well, not be around and hang out with us and do the reviews. So he really wants to be on, but unfortunately situations are going that don't allow him to. But hopefully he'll be back next week. All right, well, there it is. That's our review. Thanks so much for joining us, Laura. Another fun show. Always love talking Star Wars with you. Please let people know where to find you, what you got going on, and about your other podcast, please.
Yeah, come find me on Twitter at shutup_Laura, and you can hear my podcast Force Toast, a Star Wars Happy Hour, on all major podcast platforms. And we are on we are on Twitter at shutup. No, that's me. We're on Twitter at Force Toast Pod, so you can find us and all of our links to all of our episodes there. I've been very fortunate to get to do a couple of guest spots recently to talk about the High Republic novel Temptation of the Force. Some of those are out, some of them are not yet. The book is still fairly new, so a lot of the spoiler reviews that I've recorded where they're holding back on putting all those spoilers out into the universe. But as soon as they're out there, I will definitely tweet them. It's probably a lot more fun for me to talk about things in Star Wars that I'm really loving, and I'm sure it's more fun to listen to. So I look forward to sharing those with the masses.
There you go. As for me, you guys know, at the Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Please remember to subscribe to the channel down below and hit that bell button so you see we're dropping all the content we do here. And leave us your comments down below. Let us know what you think. I mean, keep it civil. Don't be toxic. But let us know what you think about what's going on here. Yes, you may not like the writing, you may not like, but be specific. What is it? And then how would you improve it? I'm always curious to hear what you all think, because you are such learned Star Wars fans. What do you all think about what's working, what's not working about the show and about this episode in particular? And what would you do to maybe fix it or plus it so that it would really get across to more and more people and they could enjoy it? Let us know down in the comments section below. All right, Laura, what do we have to tell them before we wrap up here?
As Qui-Gon Jinn once said, always remember, your focus determines your reality.